Hello, everyone. This is Sunday on April 14th, and this will take us through the next week um, of our course. And as I'm sure you're all well aware, it's rapidly coming to an end. We only have 3 weeks left, including this week, which is amazing. It's gone really, really fast. But anyways, so we've got quite a bit coming up. I think there's a bit of breathing room for everyone to get done what you need to get done. But anyways, just a reminder that this Friday you need to post, or by this Friday you need to post on the discussion board the course assignments section of your course proposal, your syllabus that you'll turn in 3 weeks. So this needs to be as complete as possible. So you need to basically do a full course calendar of the texts that you will use. If you haven't identified them, you need to jump on Amazon now and find which readings you'll have a draft of that out by Friday, how you'll plot that out week by week, if this is an 8-week class or a 16-week class. Anyways, that all needs to be plotted out. So are you going to have discussion readings? Are you going to have, or discussion responses, reading responses, essays, exams, all of it. What you would see in a typical syllabus. You need to have that posted by Friday onto the discussion board. And then by Friday of next week, we will have our regular reading responses on chapters 14 through 17. But you also need to have posted on the discussion board working drafts of your final projects. So a completed syllabus, all the elements put together, and your revised teaching philosophy. So all of that will need to be done by next week. And after going through the readings for this week, they're pretty short, pretty brief, really. One of the chapters, chapter 19, you could probably skip altogether because I think it's kind of, I don't want to say useless, but I think all of you, I don't know, you could probably skip 19 and I won't be too upset. But anyways, it's that I think you have plenty of breathing space the next couple of weeks to get everything done that needs to be done. The course assignment thing is kind of the most rigorous, detailed part of the drafts that you've turned in so far, but there's time. So get to cracking if you haven't already, and just know that by Friday of next week, I need you to have those working drafts posted so I can start going through and have plenty of time to give you revisions so you can then turn it in the final drafts on May 3rd by 5 p.m. So what this means is I need you to keep a close eye on discussion boards for my feedback, any new feedback from me on what you have submitted so far on the final course assignments. So might be going back a couple weeks, but I'm going to try and double back and see where I could kind of fill in some holes or answer any questions or just kind of rethink what you've given me so far. So just keep a close eye on the discussion boards. And then I was just thinking, maybe the most interesting part of our discussion from last week on the discussion boards was this idea of how we balance preparing our students in mass communication for the professional world versus being instructors and not employers. Because there's two different ethics there. There's two different kind of approaches to what we're doing. So, as many of you posted and as I posted, in the real world, in your job outside of college, your attendance is compulsory. You have to be there or you lose your job in most cases. Unless you have a really good excuse. And sometimes when you have a really good excuse, you still get canned. And so, that's a very real concern. Something we really need to help our students understand is that deadlines matter in the mass communication field, specifically, more than they do in a lot of fields, I think. But at the same time, we need to provide enough room for our students to actually learn from their mistakes. And there is some benefit from failure, but how exactly do we build into our teaching learning from that failure? because grades are somewhat permanent. And as some of you pointed out, employers really don't care what your grades are. I mean, they don't. People don't ask for your GPA. GPAs matter maybe if you're getting into, grad school, but that's your GRE matters more. But grades are only one indicator, and I think sometimes too many students are too concerned with grades versus learning. And in some institutions that have that weight grades differently based on if they're A pluses, A's, or A minuses, you really see, the driven students really can, start to worry about 1 point, 2 point versus actually getting something out of an assignment. But I digress a little bit. But anyways, I mean, we just really have to kind of keep an eye on, are we teaching our students or are we their employers? And I would say we might err on the side of being their teachers and their instructors. To know that, we're students are consumers, they pay for our services, which is a sad thing. But at the same time, pedagogically, we have a responsibility to teach them. So, whatever that means in terms of our course requirements and helping prepare them for the real world, maybe we just should keep an eye on a sense of how we can best do that with a real sense of consequence, but also learning. Anyway, so yeah, I don't think there's any really clear answers. I don't think there's one way to do it. I think there's many ways. We just have to know that and just kind of be aware of that in our field specifically. Okay, so we had 3 chapters this week, and again, 19, after I was going back through, I was like, yeah, laboratory, okay, whatever. So 19, you can brush that aside. Unless there's just something in there that strikes you that didn't strike me, perfectly fine, feel free to respond. Anyways, I was just looking at 18 and kind of active learning and this idea of organizing students into study groups, kind of preordained study groups. And then just thinking, there's blended learning, sure. But a lot of times, like even, students in traditional settings in brick and mortar schools, at least the schools that I've gone to have to work outside of school. And so establishing these times outside of class where they have to get together with a group of strangers may be really challenging and very difficult. I think that's a real concern for most students, especially, students who aren't getting their way paid through school by parents that have to support themselves. So I don't know. I think that should be something we should think about when we're planning our courses, that while I'm a full proponent of rigorous coursework, asking too much extra time that can't be fit into, say, someone who has to wait tables 6 days a week, we should try to accommodate that. So if we can, or understand that requirement and fit our teaching schedule into that as well. But then, just some things I found a little problematic. This idea of blended and active learning suggestions, about clickers, about answering things. Some of it seemed to assume that students in these large lectures would all have access to laptop computers. And, I don't think that's always the case. And so I know like a lot of engineering programs, for instance, students have to have laptops. Okay, be that as it may, I think it assumes a lot to think that students can afford, endless technology, access to endless technology. I know getting a computer was kind of late in the game for me as a college student. I, even now, financially can't afford to be at the front of things technologically. And so, there's still the struggling college student out there. And so how do students accommodate that, or how do colleges accommodate that? And then also, reconcile it with their own budget crunches. So just something to think about. This new technology is fine and good and all, but I personally am a little uncomfortable expecting students to have access to this technology all the time. There's reasons there are computer labs on colleges everywhere. And then just some of the recommendations in the 23rd chapter about developing as a teacher and kind of staying fresh, I guess, which is kind of funny. But just something to know for those of you who aren't involved in academic conferences. There are divisions in academic conferences, and there are often papers and just whole sections on teaching skills and, thinking of things differently from teaching, kind of keeping up on top of that. So higher ed doesn't have professional development in the same sense as, say, Common Ed or, elementary school and secondary school do. They have those days where the teachers actually they don't teach, they sit in professional development. And higher ed's a little bit differently, but there are lots of opportunities at universities and at professional conferences to kind of sharpen your skills, get exposed to new ideas, um, show what you've learned as your own. And there are fields within our discipline, for instance, that focus on media pedagogy and on teaching media literacy, all these things. So you just kind of have to look for it. If you look at some of our conferences, for instance, there's National Communication Association, which is NCA, and ICA, the International Communication Association, and AJMC. But they all have divisions on teaching. They all have like special awards for it, and so there's ways to stay on top of it. There's, whole journals dedicated to it and everything. So there's ways to, kind of know what's going on, keep your feet wet with what is going on. And I think maybe next week I might try and just put some information there for you all to consider. Nothing, that goes into what you have to discuss about kind of more of the professional, like how you go about teaching in college and some of the realities of what you have to do. And because it's a pretty intense process. I mean, that's been my experience anyways. But anyways, I think that's it. Um, pretty short readings. Again, the important thing is to kind of look to your final projects at this point in the class, kind of sharpening what you want to do in terms of your course assignments and the readings that we've done, in terms of, how do you test students, how do you assess them and what you're trying to teach. This assignment on Friday, what you have to turn in on Friday, will kind of really be where you have to sit down and decide, how do I assess what I'm trying to teach? How do I know if the students are learning what I'm trying to teach? So it's a little more thought-provoking process than you might first expect. It's not just a given what you're going to do. How do you best know that your students are reading the things that you're assigning and understanding them and applying them? So it can be pretty interesting. And I urge you to use assignments that you've had in other courses that have really been helpful to you. So that's why I tend to try and have a discussion heavy format in my classes, because I enjoyed it as an undergraduate, I enjoyed it as a graduate student, and I found it was a really good way to learn. Um, but anyways, email me with any questions. Please use the South Dakota State email address, not D2L if you need to get a hold of me. I promise you it's much quicker. Anyways, have a good week.